It's part, I'm giving a share. Shalom, everybody. Welcome to the portion of Kiseitse as we wind down the Hebrew calendar and we get closer to Rosh Hashanah. We're in the middle of the Shiva de Nechemta. Kiseitse, by the way, only has 110 verses, and yet it has the most mitzvahs of any portion of the Torah. There are 74 commandments. 27 are positive, 47 are negative. Think about this. There is 613 mitzvahs in the Torah. There's like 54 portions, 53 portions. And yet Kiseitse has 74. That's close to 12% of all the mitzvahs of the Torah. Now, the portion of Kiseitse starts with a very strange law. The Torah says, Kiseitse la milchama aleivecha. When you go out to war against your enemy, and the Almighty gives him into your hand, v'shaviso shivyoi, and you capture any captives. And then the Torah tells us the laws that if there's a captive woman that you strongly desire, she should mourn her parents in your home for 30 days, and then you may marry her. If you choose not to marry her, then you have to let her go free. Now, at first glance, it's very difficult to understand. The Torah is timeless. The Torah is written for all time, all ages. What lessons do we learn today where we have no wars in that way? We certainly have no slaves or captives. What lesson is it that we can learn from it? And the sages tell us that this is referring to the daily battle. All of us, from the moment we wake up, throughout, we are kind of in a spiritual battle between our Yetzer Hara, the worldly forces, the influences, and those things in the world that are captured, as we'll discuss in a moment. And we have to fight against it and bring it back. So there's a very deep Kabbalistic concept called Birurei Hanetzutzos, which means to purify the divine sparks. We are told that in creation, there was so to say, a war between the good and the not so good, and many holy sparks got captured by the not so good. And it is up to us to purify. How do we do it? When we use an object for holiness, then it fulfills its true mission. That spark is elevated and returns to God. But until then, it is, so to say, trapped in its mundane form. And that is true in everything that we do. When we take an animal, shecht it, and use that leather for tefillin, it is the greatest thing you can do for that animal. And, or the wood for a sukkah, there's a spark in that leather, in that wood, and it becomes elevated and returns to the Creator. By the way, the same is true when we do exercise. If we go to gym, and our point is to have a clearer, fresher body and mind, we shouldn't be so fatigued during the day, that is sparks that we are elevating. And so too, when we eat any food that gives our body energy, and our intention is that we can use it properly to serve God, that elevates the spark inside the mundane item, freeing them from captivity and returning them to Hashem. So that, they explain, is the meaning of that verse. Ki seitze la melchama alevecha. When you go to war with your Yetzer Tov, with your godly soul, against the temptations, against all those things which tear us away from God during the day, and we use the physical in order to uplift it to spiritual, then you are redeeming those captives. They bring here in this book a very fascinating story with many more details, but I could tell you, just by the way, personally, I grew up with that story. When I was a little child, before we went to sleep, my oldest sister actually, in a way, told us the story with a little difference. And here it is. The Vov of Zhytomyr worked for a time in an inn. One winter day, a wagon driver, a Jewish guy, entered the inn together with several passengers, and he asked for some liquor to warm himself so he could continue his journey. And when the wagon driver stretched out his hand to grab that cup of liquor and down it, the wolf stopped him. And he said, "Do you know how this liquor is made?" The wagon driver said, "Who cares? I'm cold. I want to warm up quickly. I could continue the way." The wolf said, "No, not so quick. I want to tell you how it's made." The wagon driver realized the only way he is going to get to the drink is if he lets him explain. So he said, "Go ahead." He said, "You know, this liquor is made from wheat kernels. It goes through a long process on the way from the field to your cup. First, the kernels are planted in a large field. And this kernel, this specific one, is praying to God, please put me into the part of the field that will grow nicely. It gets the water, it gets the sun. Don't put me on a hard patch of land that won't grow." Finally, this kernel managed to get to the right piece of land. It's growing. Then the next prayer is, please, God, keep me on this stalk. Don't let me be blown away by a strong wind. Many of the kernels were. This one finally ripened. And now they say, when they reap up the kernels, when they cut it, make sure that I don't fall out the hand, I stay there. And they finally make it to the granary. They say, please don't let me fall into the chaff barrel, into the garbage. They're collected from the granary, and they're concerned that they not be forgotten at the bottom of the barrel. Finally, they make it to the liquor factory, and they're going to be put into bottles. And their prayer is, God, listen to me, please, says the colonel, now in the liquor. Make sure that my bottle ends up in a Jewish shop, a shop where Jews go to, not where the non-Jews go. And I want to make sure that a Jew says a blessing upon me so that I will be uplifted. There's a divine spark in that bottle of liquor that is waiting to be uplifted by a Jew saying a bracha. And he says, there are actually souls that can come down to this world again in various forms of reincarnation to rectify certain things. And reincarnation is not only into the souls of human beings, it can even be into the animals. It could even be into the grains. It could even be in this wheat kernel. So just imagine how much that kernel went through just to make it into your cup of vodka, so that you should say the proper blessing Shahakol and elevate the soul that was reincarnated into this. Think before you say that l'chaim. Remember to make that blessing, and you've elevated the soul. Don't make the blessing and nebach. That soul will have to go through that whole journey again. When the wagon driver heard the Rebbe telling that story, he cried out and he said, do you know, today is my father's yahrzeit. Maybe it is his neshama that is waiting for me to elevate it. What should I do? And Abvol said, say the blessing Shahakol with all the intent in the world, and say l'chaim with the intention that your father's neshama should be elevated. That is the beginning of the portion kiseitze, that we are going out to war to elevate the sparks. And not only that, but have you ever felt hungry in your life? That might be a physical expression of your neshama yearning to elevate the sparks of holiness that is inside the food. And that is hinted in a verse of Psalms, which says, Ra'evim in gam tzemeim nafshom behem tisatov, which is translated that when a person is hungry and thirsty, it is his soul that is involved in this feeling, desiring to elevate the sparks of holiness to be used for serving of God. You know, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe in a discourse says that is why we have a greater relish for fresh food than leftover food and old food, because here the sparks are still ready to be uplifted. And you know, when the Jews left Egypt, it says the aid of Rav came up with them. And the aid of Rav, the mixed multitudes, but Rav adds up to 202. And that is that when they left Egypt, they took out all the 202 sparks of holiness that were in Egypt at that time. And, you know, the Torah forbids us to live in Egypt. And one reason is because there are no sparks of holiness left there. So we have no purpose in being there. And we are told that everything in life was created with the potential to be used for serving God. And so God forbids us from wasting things because we have to use everything to fulfill us. We learned this from Yaakov Avinu. When he realized he had a few small containers behind, he went back for them because he still had some sparks there to elevate them. This we have to no right to leave it behind. In this portion, by the way, we have the laws of marriage, of divorce, of returning lost articles. There's many, including sending away the mother bird, building a parapet. But we only have enough time to go to the end of the portion. The end of the portion is the Haftarah is called Zachor Eis Asher Asa Lecha Amalek Ba'derech B'tzeischem Mitzrayim. We have to remember that which God did to us when we left Egypt. That which Amalek, the cursed nation, did to us when we left Egypt. By the way, there's right before Purim, the Shabbos before Purim is called Parshas Zohar, and we read this Haftarah. And we are told that, you know what Amalek did? They attacked the Jews when they left Egypt. Now, do you know what that is? When the Jews left Egypt, they had conquered. Egypt at that time was the superpower of the world. It was like Rome at its height. It was like all those ancient nations in their height. Here, a little slave nation like the Jews wiped out the Egyptians and were traveling. The whole world was in awe of the Jewish people and their God. They couldn't believe it. They were just, as I say, totally nullified and in awe of them. Now, Amalek cannot bear people to be impressed with godliness. So they said, we are going to attack the Jews. Doesn't matter, we'll be beaten, but we'll attack them just to show that they can be beaten. In fact, Rashi says it is similar to a very hot bath where the smoke is coming up. Nobody wants to go in there. Comes one Meshuggah, and he says, I'm going to go in. And when he comes out, even if he's a bit verbrent, the fact that he went in and came out alive cools down the bath in everybody's mind. So what Amalek did was cool down the enthusiasm of the entire world of God's protection of the Jewish people. And the world saw that maybe the Jews aren't as untouchable as what's thought. And this is, again, a lesson for all of us. Amalek wages a personal war with every Jew on a daily basis. You know, we've often discussed that if you would take every strange things that happen to you and your family over a series of even 3 weeks, write them down and read them back afterwards, I guarantee you, you will see that the Almighty exists and he's playing a hand in each and every one of our lives. And that works till a person says, pass the ketchup, and you forget about it. But if you'd note it down and read it, you would see it. And you would suddenly get a great passion and enthusiasm for godliness. Amalek is that cynic who comes along and says, don't be crazy. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, maybe it's synchronicity, maybe it's just coincidence. And he throws doubt into it. Or he might say, what's Mr. Meshuggah? Who said it's so important? It's just a mitzvah. What Amalek is within each and every one of us is trying to do is cool down our enthusiasm and weaken our excitement about serving God. Because if you're excited about it, he'll never get you to stop it. But if he can weaken your enthusiasm, it is a short way to weakening your actual performance of the mitzvah. You know, at the end of Shachris, we say the 6 remembrances. And one of them is to remember what Amalek has done to us. And it refers to those sinister whispers within our head that tries to cool us down. And the best way to defeat Amalek is to instill even more eagerness and passion into every action of every day. Daven out loud, learn with pleasure, take time to notice God's creations, thanking him for all the ways that we have to destroy Amalek. You know that Amalek in Hebrew, ayin is 70, mem is 40, that's 110, Lamed is 30, that's 140, and Kuf is another 100, adds up to 240. 240. The word doubt is the same numerical value. Samach is 60, Pei is 80, that's 140, and Kuf again is 240. Because God, Amalek, just plant seeds of doubt in our heads about God and his Torah. And once they're not so certain, he can cool them off their passion and making them cold and apathetic. And in fact, the reminder of Amalek's deceit comes immediately after the prohibition of not having unfair or weighted measuring systems. You know, in those days, they had scales like this, and you would put, let's say you had a kilo weight, and then you would put the kilo of produce, and when it was balanced. So the Torah says, if you have a kilo weight, don't cut it down to be 950 grams or anything. And these are connected. Amalek cannot approach a righteous, honest person and convince him to commit a terrible sin. He'll refuse. He starts with small, seemingly insignificant things that lead to larger and larger ones. First, Amalek says, don't be so particular in their measurements, allowing their service of Hashem to slip bit by bit. And then it leads to full frontal attack, doubting his service of Hashem in general. Life is a slippery slope, and the best way to defeat Amalek is to be careful with the smallest details of this. And he also points out, by the way, that the word Amalek and the word Malika, which is a way of shechting a bird in the base Hamikdash, Amalek tries to separate our head from the rest of the body, so that even when we learn Torah or think about God, it shouldn't affect our heart, but we have to have an enthusiasm towards it. There's an interesting law. The Torah says, the Shulchan Aruch says, if a snake wraps itself around your foot while he's davening, don't interrupt. But if a scorpion is on his foot, stop davening and get rid of it. Ask the Rebbe, what's the difference? They're both poisonous. And he says, snake venom is hot. Scorpion's venom is cold. If we have a heated enthusiasm, even if it's for unholy, we can then take that passion and direct it into holy matters. But when a person is cold and apathetic, to turn that to start caring about God, that's very difficult. And so when it's a scorpion, stop and regain your enthusiasm. And he tells here a story that the students of the Baal Shem Tov were discussing a lesson they had just learned. Their holy Rebbe, the Baal Shem Tov, had told them that everything that happens to your life is Hashgacha Pratis, divine providence. And anything you see or hear is meant to teach you something to help improve your Avodas Hashem. And they walked outside in Mezhebush in the winter. It is cold, similar to when I grew up in Montreal and Senegath. The lake in Senegath, it has such strong ice that you could drive trucks on it. And they came to that lake and they saw the Galach, the local priest, taking a saw onto that lake, which was full of ice, and he carved out a cross, a symbol of his religion, in the frozen river. And they said, "Oy, oy, oy. What an unholy sight we are seeing." The Baal Shem Tov told us that we can learn from everything we see or hear for the service of Hashem, of God. What on earth can we learn from the fact that we see this galach carving out that? And they ran back to the Baal Shem Tov and asked him that question. And the Baal Shem Tov said, it is very simple. Torah, our mitzvahs are compared to water. When the water is warm and hot, use that to serve God. But when the water becomes cold and frozen, it is possible to result in something as extreme as idol worship, as you saw on that lake, which means for us today, it's not enough to just do Torah mitzvahs. You have to do them with joy and enthusiasm to ensure that we remain close to God. When it comes to the Haftarah, we are already on the 5th of the Shiva D'Nechemta, which means, by the way, this Shabbos, 2 more after that is Rosh Hashanah. And there's the 7 of comfort. Roni Akara Lo Yolodah. And this Haftarah foretells the repopulation of the holy city of Jerusalem and the promises that the shame of abandonment will be forgotten. The Almighty is going to redeem the Bnei Yisrael. And while physical elements change and erode, we should know that God's bond with Jewish people lasts and lasts forever. And we have to make sure that our bond with God, our personal bond with God, remains warm, remains enthusiastic, and we give that down as a legacy to our future generations to ensure that we're all there for Mashiach's coming. Shabbat Shalom. Wonderful being with you. Hope to see you next week. God bless you.